When you hear the phrase cult horror, your mind might go to Ari Aster's Midsummer, or perhaps even the 1973 Wicker Man by Robin Hardy. However, I'm talking about a slightly different kind of cult. So, in order to explain what cult cinema means in regard to the horror genre specifically, I'm going to be using two films as examples. The first one being Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, and the second being Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses. Evil Dead began as a passion project and was Raimi's debut feature film, based on his short Within the Woods. Raimi, Campbell, and the producer Rob Taper all dropped out of college to make films. They bought cheap work uniforms and briefcases, and they went door to door asking friends and family to fund them. Once it was completed, they used it to attract investors who provided them with the funds to create Evil Dead, albeit on a shoestring budget with an inexperienced cast. So what exactly makes this cult? Well, according to Mattez and Mendig, innovation and badness is what comprises the anatomy of a cult film, whether or not that's incidental or intentional in Evil Dead's case. But what really blew the cult aspect of Evil Dead out of the water, in my opinion, though, was Video Nasties. Video Nasties itself is already a huge topic, which I could spend a very, very long time on, so I'll link some videos in the description which I think explain it pretty well. So, unfortunately for the distributors, Evil Dead was released at the peak of the Video Nasties fearmongering craze. Local police began raiding distributors to confiscate any dangerous media, Evil Dead being one of the main offenders in their eyes. Cinema releases were either heavily edited or simply neglected to be shown at all. And Raimi was actually taken to court over the film and the supposed danger it posed to young, impressionable minds. So why would heavy censorship, bans, and legal trouble create a cult fanbase? Well, all the mystery and controversy surrounding the Evil Dead and other films of its time naturally made people curious, as they are, about what was causing such a fuss. Home viewing of the film became increasingly popular and gave it a reputation as this satanic and evil cursed spectacle. And whether or not that was actually true didn't matter, because you already bought the bloody VHS tape. Eventually it was removed from the Video Nasties list, and British moral campaigner Mary Whitehouse, the person who led the charge against Evil Dead, mind you, later admitted that they hadn't even seen the film, which was pretty ironic if you ask me.
Yeah, well, I hated that movie. Too long and boring and not enough boobies.
And maybe looking back, compared to more modern horror, it's less gory and more laughable, but it didn't matter because Evil Dead had already earned its title as an influential horror staple, and continues to attract new fans like myself today. And it's timeless in its own way because the dated effects and the cinematography only serve to sweeten the pot and further reinforce that cult charm. Some people do say, however, that Evil Dead has lost its cult status now because of how popular it's gotten. Christopher Brown, in particular, argues, how big is your cult if you've got 2 sequels, a successful remake, computer games, comics, and a 3-season TV show off your back? But I think that, even if Evil Dead has gained popularity over the years, it's simply just a testament to Raimi's innovation at the time, which has only grown to be appreciated in retrospect, and outside of this it still retains very cult elements which can easily be overlooked in favour of the acknowledgement of its now mainstream appeal.
Howdy, folks. Like blood, violence, freaks of nature? Well, then come on down to Captain Spaulding's Museum of Monsters and Man.
House of a Thousand Corpses was Robert Cummings', more professionally known as Rob Zombie's, directorial debut and the beginning of the Firefly trilogy, which after its release spawned its own attraction in Universal Studios due to its cult following. Further building on Mattez and Mendig's cult film anatomy, House of a Thousand Corpses is filled with gore and uncomfortable material to say the least. It's a low-budget, grindhousey exploitation film which strays far, far from mainstream appeal. The film's plot can be considered very contrived and confusing, leaving loose narrative ends so much so that Clint Morris of Film Threat says it's basically an hour and a half of undecipherable plot, and James Brundig described it as too highbrow to be a good cheap horror movie, and too lowbrow to be satire. But once you start to pick it apart like Morris has, you've immediately missed the point of this film, because it really leans into just how bad and ridiculous it is. It's extremely self-aware, and Zombie's editing of the film only serves to further drive this point home. Everman says that the phrase cult horror film has come to mean bad horror film, and that's a bit unfair, but only a bit. And that cult horror has a fanbase that will literally watch anything as long as it's a horror flick. Which is arguably very true for Zombies 1,000 Corpses. I think if it took itself a bit more seriously, it would join the room with So Bad They're Good films, but in spite of this, amazing character performances from people like Sid Haig and Rainn Wilson, and just how intense and balls to the wall it is, make it a great film. Not to mention the cinematography, which is also wonderfully stylized and very visually striking. And the contrast between the good and the bad in this film transgresses the boundaries of what it means to be good cinema, and shows that cult is really just subjective, and that's why it has this small, dedicated fanbase. Going back to the violent nature of this film, it really is probably one of the most disturbing films I've seen that retains its personality and isn't gory for the sake of being gory. House of 1,000 Corpses was initially shelved by the company Universal Pictures before its release due to fears of an NC-17 rating, but Zombie later managed to repurchase the rights to the work, eventually selling it to Lionsgate Entertainment. Church claims that cult films violate the social conventions of their time, and if sewing Dwight from The Office onto a fish isn't that, then I don't know what is. This use of practical effects that depict extreme gore throughout the entire film give it a one-way ticket to cult status. As Mattez and Mendick say, yucky stuff is a sure way to grant a film's cult status. Thank you for watching my video essay. I hope I provided some insight into why these films have gained the cult following that they have. I hope you found it interesting and have a good day.